From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
There was a man who went to visit a church, and this was something that he did on a regular basis. He traveled a lot, and so as he traveled around the country, he would drop in on various churches, and he was, in this particular day, attending a church in some town, and he was the kind of guy that, you know, felt things deeply and was kind of an expressive guy. So as the minister was delivering his message, and there was something very a powerful point that the minister made, he couldn't contain himself, and he was moved to say amen. And everybody turned and looked around at him, gave him this odd, strange look. And later, when the minister said something that he thought was humorous, he started laughing out loud, and all of a sudden realized he was the only one laughing, and all the people started looking at him again, and the lady he happened to sit next to turned to him and said, "We don't do that here." And so a little later, the soloist sang a beautiful song, and so he was moved to clap, and he was the only one applauding. And again, the lady moved and leaned over and said, "We don't do that either here." And anyway, when they stood for the closing song, he really belted it out and realized that he was really the only one singing with any gusto. And after the service was over, really, nobody seemed to be greeting anyone, and certainly no one came to greet him. And everyone had this kind of demeanor that was just kind of distant. So anyway, the guy finally went up to one of the congregants, and he says, "You know, well, what is it that you believe here?" And the person said, "Well, we believe that it's our duty to carry our personal crosses until Jesus Christ comes." And the man replied and said, "Well, I don't mean to be disrespectful. But I think if he ever did visit this church, he wouldn't come back." So if you're new or here for the first time, I hope you will laugh as you are laughing. I hope you'll applaud as you have applauded. And if you don't think you're a good singer, we'll drown you out. And as for amens, I don't need them, but 3 out of 4 is okay. You know, at the first service, everyone started shouting amen. You know, just everything's okay. And here at Unity, you know, we are a church that emphasizes the teachings of Jesus Christ. We accept and honor all paths, but we're really about Jesus Christ and his teachings, and we believe that the second coming of Christ is real. And we don't focus on the return of Jesus, the man, the physical person, but we do focus on the return or the second coming of Christ in you. You know, that it is something that is to happen in you. And as the Apostle Paul said, the mystery which has been hidden for ages and generations, Christ in you, your hope of glory. Talked about the idea that there is a Christ living in all of us. There is a dimension of the divine that wants to come forth. And so the second coming is real. And the resurrection story about an event over 2,000 years ago is really meant also to become a personal, therefore, current event in each and every one of our personal lives. There's something that's supposed to happen to rise up in us of the Christ Spirit. There's much that is written about the history, you know, of the event of Jesus' death and resurrection. Libraries are full of books and manuscripts and articles and commentaries and what have you. And actually it is said that one of the most revered New Testament scholars is Father Raymond Brown. And it is said that he had published a huge study called The Death of the Messiah, which was an exhaustive 1,608-page commentary on just the last days of Jesus. And it was 20 years in the making, and he accessed the work of over 2,000 scholars in doing this. And so there have been obviously some real serious studies and dissecting really of the facts of the history of what happened, which is fine and good. But after the history, then one must get into the mystery of this powerful event and begin to take it within as a personal event of what was meant to be really an experience for all of us, really, that we make it personal, we make it our story in some way, that the resurrection of the Christ is about something of God that Jesus was modeling and teaching. And he wants us to rise in, to be resurrected ourselves, that there's something in us that refuses to die, that wants to keep being rebirthed and come to life again. And so there is what we call the light of God and the light of God's love. And it can never be extinguished. It's always there. And it's what leads us really to the victories in life, is all the times that we refer to and connect to consciously that which is the light and take ourselves away from anything that energetically feels dark. We're going to be led to victory. You know, if I showed you a symbol like this, kind of a whoosh, do you all know what it is? Nike? Yeah, it's Nike. And so what is their slogan? Just do it. Just do it. Just win, baby. Just win, you know? And we also have the cross, which is a sort of a logo or symbol, and it can mean different things to different people. It can mean death, suffering, crucifixion, sacrifice, whatever. But the cross is a vertical that intersects with a horizontal. And our bodies form a cross when we put our arms out, you know. And basically it symbolizes the intersection of the head with the heart. And that there is to be that blending and intersecting of head and heart in our lives. It's very important. And that the material and the spiritual realms together are to blend together, and the transcendent and the immanent and all of that. For me, there are 2 points about Easter that stand out. And there can be others, of course, but there are 2 really. And one of them is that Easter, the Easter story validates and puts an exclamation point on the idea of immortality and eternity, that we are eternal souls, all right? And on some level, we all know that life is eternal, but people still, many fear death because it's an element of the unknown. But you know, all cultures down through time have in various ways embraced the idea that we are immortal, that we are eternal beings. Jesus was quoted to say, "Let not your hearts be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you." And so rooms can also mean realms. In my Father's great house of universes are many realms. And it's for us to awaken to the truth of knowing that and understanding that. So many cultures have had symbols of various kinds that have represented this idea of the eternality. In the ancient Near East, and even among many other cultures, the honeybee, interestingly, was considered a sacred insect that bridged the natural world with the world beyond. And in I've read where it was one of the most deeply revered creatures actually in human history, that in Egyptian mythology, when the tears of the sun god Ra fell into the desert sand, bees grew from them. And then the bowstring of the Hindu love god, Kamadeva, is made of honeybees. Bees are associated with altered states of consciousness. Mead, M-E-A-D, is actually a fermented honey drink that is said to be older than wine itself. And so for many cultures and peoples, honeybees represented immortality and resurrection. And so there is an ancient custom that is referred to as telling the bees, in which it was very important for the bees to be informed or let them know when their beekeeper had died, if he had passed on. And if you didn't, it was noted that in many instances, the bees would actually leave or vacate and go somewhere else and leave those hives empty. And there are lots of stories about this, actually. And I'll share one story with you from 1961, actually. It's about a postman named Sam Rogers who lived in a village in England. And he was a postman, but he also had 14 beehives that he was the keeper of. And when he died, his children had been informed of the importance it was to tell the bees that he had passed on. So his children went around the 14 beehives and spoke that he had passed on. And it was in the Associated Press, April 1961, that it told how shortly after the children did that, that some of the relatives gathered at the grave site for a brief service. And when they were there, thousands of bees from the hives, his hives, that were more than a mile away, came and descended all around the casket and were there, thousands of them. Even while there were flowering trees and other things around, the bees came there in masses, and that they were there for about a half an hour. Then they all flew back to their hives where they had come from. There's another story of a young family that lost their 3-year-old son to a deadly virus. And the family was overwhelmed, of course, with grief, including the 5-year-old sister had lost her brother. And at the service itself, as the memorial service was nearing the end, a bee flew in through a window in the church. And it was in full view to everyone. And first it flew to the flowers which were by the coffin, and then it started flying in small circles around the coffin and the casket, and then finally larger and larger circles. And then after it had done that, it slowly flew over to where the 3 family members were, the little girl and the mom and dad, and began to circle around the heads of that family. And then after it had done that, it came and hovered right in front of the child, about a foot away, and just hovered. And they said that the child almost seemed hypnotized by it. It just went for a lengthy time. And then finally, after it had done that, it just flew and went out a window out of the church. You know what the message was? Life is eternal. Your loved one is immortal. It's all okay. It's interesting how we're interconnected in so many ways. Circles mean no beginning and no end. And that was a symbol that was being communicated if they were open to hearing it. But what is it that happens like that? What is it that is the universe, God, our various forms in which messages come to us to convey comfort, console us, love us, tell us of a truth? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold. In the scriptures, Paul lists specific living witnesses of the risen Jesus. And there are differing accounts of the appearances. Sometimes he appears in the flesh and blood, solid. And then other times he is ethereal and can walk through walls. Sometimes he is recognized by those who are around, and at other times he's not. And it's only after he speaks and identifies himself that they know who he is. And I don't have any problem, believing any and all forms in which the Christ can emerge and manifest. And it's important that we be open and receptive to so much that we don't know in the mystery of it all. For me, one big lesson of the resurrection and the Easter story, as I say, is that we are eternal beings and that we are not to fear death. That, as Paul says, we have a physical body and we have a spiritual body. And one is seen and the other is unseen. And the unseen is housed within the seen. And the seen body is temporal, and the unseen, he says, is eternal. And so even he was talking about that evidence of a spirit that dwells. And Jesus was always about removing fear. Anything that was about fear, he wanted to remove that. And why was that? Because essentially, as we have come to conclude, there are essentially only 2 emotions. It's basically fear or love. And every time you remove a bit more fear in you, what takes its place but love? And Jesus was about love. That was his mission. That was his teaching. That's what it was about, love and forgiveness. He modeled it. He exemplified it. He was about that. And not just love one another. It was an unconditional love. It was a stretching kind of love that might not be easy. Love your enemy. Love those that have wanted to do harm to you. Go the extra mile. Many ways that he spoke to this idea of it. When he said that he must be about his Father's business, I believe that the Father's business was about loving. Loving universally, loving unconditionally, forgiving. He demonstrated it again and again. Total love and acceptance of all other human beings was at the heart of Jesus' message and teachings. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what they have done. It was always there. And the scripture has said, of course, that the law was given by Moses, the law, the principles, okay? But grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. What is grace except the love of God? And Jesus was about that. Consider all that happened also to the human Jesus. All that he went through, all that he had to deal with. He was arrested, and then his disciples and all his followers fall away. They abandon him. in fear that they too might be arrested. And so he is really utterly alone. There's no human support that he has. And during biblical times, the Romans, they knew how to execute people. And, they had the swift way, which was with the sword that they did numerous times and would often, do privately executions. But there was no Roman citizen, it is said, that was ever crucified. That was reserved for those who were considered a threat to the Roman Empire. And so once the trial was completed of such a person, the person was then beaten and whipped, and then the cross was put on their back, and they had to, carry it. And it wasn't taken through the back roads. It was taken through the main streets so everyone would see, and you'd be humiliated. They'd even sometimes carry a sign stating what the crime of the person was. And so then after that, various times they were scoffed at and spit on, and then finally hung on the cross to die. And so it was this kind of death that Jesus was brought into. And so just consider for a moment, what that humanly, must have been to endure. The human side. He was human and divine, but that human side. And in the midst of that kind of physical pain and emotional pain, in that moment, he doesn't shout out, "How could you have done this to me?" No. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing." And is there anything that we have faced that can compare or equate that we have had to forgive in our lives? Just stop and think. So again, he was taken to the extreme to say, doesn't matter what has occurred, who's done it, who's not done it, where the failure has occurred. It's always about love and forgiveness. That's the only thing that is resurrecting and will bring to a fullness of life. And so what it says again and again is that there is a love that is greater than anything that can ever happen to us or be done to us. There is a love in us that says, I want one thing. I want to lift you up. I want to take the life that you're living and show you how great it could be if you would just allow me to create a little more room to express through you. It is that love that resurrects. And it is that which Jesus demonstrated, really. It's a way of living, it's a pattern. And the miracle of love basically is not found in starting with trying to correct something. It is found in first connection, making the connection with God, and from there being led and guided as to what are the correcting steps. Sometimes we, charge into wanting to do and correct something, but first we need to make the connection so it's founded and established in the divine. There's a story from World War II about a man named Austin Goodrich. And in 1995, he attended the 50th anniversary for veterans of World War II. And he attended that event, and then after it, he did some writing as well about the story of his time when he was serving. And he told the story where he and his platoon had been marching all day and had gotten to a ridge over a town. And they were tired, but the platoon was told that they were going to go on their first nighttime campaign. And that meant that airplanes were to come in and artillery, and they were going to bomb the town, and then their platoon would go down and take the town. But there was some confusion and miscommunication, and so the airplanes that flew over started bombing the platoon on the ridge. And they didn't have much time, and they scurried to try and dig in, but it was loud, crazy booms all around them. And when the sounds finally stopped and there was a silence, he said he began to hear the voices of men that he had marched with, calling for help, for medics, for support. And he said, then I heard a cry that 50 years later is as loud in my ears as it was that day, because it was a cry unlike any other cries or sounds I heard. There was one cry, one word, "Mother," and then silence. And he recognized the voice. It was that of Mr. Marks, was his last name. And later he spoke to the medic, and the medic said, yeah, I heard him say "mother," but by the time I got to him, he was dead. And Austin said he had wondered about that cry, that sound, that word for 50 years because he felt guilty. He hadn't sought out and found the mother to tell the mother that his son, the one word he had said, and his final word was mother. But anyway, at this reunion, or anniversary, he met one of the other guys that knew Private Marks. And he told him about that experience and that mother, the word, and how it had been with him for 50 years. And this person said, well, you know, I knew Private Marks too, and what I knew is that it's amazing that he would have said mother as his last word, because Brian Marks' mother was never known to him. He never met his mother. He never knew her. She died in childbirth. And then Austin realized why the tone of voice when he heard the word mother had stayed with him all those years. It was a cry of recognition. It was a loving recognition. Mother, mother, you know. They were connected in a way that is available to us all, that only love can do. And there are a lot of things we don't understand. Jesus said, it is my Father's house, and in my Father's house are many rooms. And so we're only like one room away from those who are in the other rooms that can hear our prayers, our thoughts, our voices, our conveyance. We are not separated from anyone or anything. Even the honeybees come to help us. Some of us are afraid to be stung, like it's the kiss of, stung with death. But they're there oftentimes to help us if we just let the fear subside. The Easter story is saying that love resurrects, that love will not die, that love rises again. And life will give us the opportunities to learn and grow. You know, there's a guy named Hugh Prather that wrote a book, and he did a lot of writing, but he had a big heart. And one of the things that he said was that we have continually lessons about love and forgiveness. All of us, that's what our life is about. And that essentially, he gave kind of the example, we all come into this life with a carousel of slides that is put on a projector and is projected onto life. And those images are different things that happen to us, circumstances. It comes in many forms, disguises, designs, and appearances as to our opportunities to express love and forgiveness. And that each lesson that comes, when you get the lesson, then that slide is gone and it is replaced with a beautiful, beautiful picture. And that those times you don't get the lesson, it goes back into the carousel only to return again. And so they'll keep returning and returning in different forms, in different designs and different images, but they're always there until we get the lesson to love and forgiveness and forgive, because that's the goal. There's a story about a guy named Bob Welch. His daughter was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. And he wept and mourned with the thousands of others who lost a loved one in that. And the first year after the bombing, he was full of rage and revenge, he said. He was drinking heavily. He felt even mentally ill. He was making himself physically ill. He said, when you're living with a desire for revenge, it's deadly. And anyway, eventually a change came over him. And he said it wasn't one that happened immediately. It wasn't like an event, but it happened over time. And it came through asking God for help, and then his following the guidance that he received. And he said that this process is one of the great mysteries and miracles of what can happen inside a human being. He was not in favor of the death penalty for Timothy McVeigh. He had reached a place of kind of forgiveness. And so 3 years after his daughter's death, he walked up and knocked on the door of Timothy McVeigh's father's house in New York State. And he went just to kind of, share each other's pain in that experience. And they walked through the garden and they talked, and his intention was to bring peace and comfort to each other. And they went inside and they talked some more in the kitchen, and the younger daughter, was there of Mr. McVeigh. And they talked some more, and when it came time for him to get up and leave, he shook hands with Mr. McVeigh, the father, and then the daughter came over and hugged his neck and hung on, and they broke down sobbing. Uncontrollably, they were sobbing. And he said he didn't know how to get out of there. And finally he said to them, and to the girl, honey, the three of us are in this for the rest of our lives. And after he left, he said he sobbed for another hour on his own, but he said it was like a huge stone lifted off his heart. And he said that he has never felt closer to God than in that moment, where he went and a huge element of forgiveness had to be dealt with. He said, what I found that morning was bigger than the tragedy I had experienced. Some people think forgiveness is a religious property, but it applies, he said, to every human being, whether you're Muslim, Jew, or atheist. Any people in relationships have hurt and misunderstanding, and forgiveness shows us that love is greater than anything. And so for Bob Welch, the slide in his carousel was tossed out, and a new and beautiful picture that helped him feel closer to God than he'd ever felt in his life was removed. And so Jesus demonstrated the resurrection principle, and the principle is love is what resurrects our lives, restores it, makes it new again, wants to be rebirthed. And there are times when the love in us shuts off or shuts down or diminishes. And resurrection is coming back to the truth of knowing that's who we are, that's what it's about. When a person is in harmony with himself, he is in harmony with all, and he gives it out all the time to all. So when a person is in harmony with himself, love and forgiveness is flowing, and the person is alive, and I mean more alive. A person who is in love and forgiveness is alive, and we all want to be alive. You know, we all want God's light and love to be alive in us, to say yes to it. So today may be your day. Today can be your day to come alive again through the resurrection of love. May it be so. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.
When you visit Unity of Houston, you'll find a spiritual community, a church where you can connect and learn and grow with a progressive approach to Christianity. At Unity, we welcome you no matter what your beliefs. You'll find a teaching, loving, inspiring experience as we help each other be all we're created to be. Check us out. We'd love to have you. Find us online at unityhouston.org, and remember, life is meant to be good.